Welcome to another English language support video. My name is Maya. I'm the English language support officer here at IMC, and this is a video version of the workshop that we had back in May about presentations. So stick around. At some point during your studies, you're probably going to be asked to do a presentation about a topic for your class. And it's a really specific skill. It's super different from written assessment. So this workshop is going to break down how it's different and how you can achieve success in this. So first, I want to tell you that speech and text differ in some really important ways. When you get something written, you can reread it as many times as you like, and so it's really easy to gain understanding for difficult concepts. For this reason, we often use written work to convey information, to hold data and facts. When we give a speech, however, we bring ourselves to the interaction. So the important thing with a speech is that you have a speaker in the room or on the Zoom room or whatever with the audience. And what this does is it makes you as the creator of this presentation really important. What it means is that a speech is not so much about the information, it's more about the transformation for the listener. And we get this through building up a connection and a rapport with our audience. Speech also requires active listening from the audience because unlike text, we can't reread it. The listener has to understand it the first time round. So we have to be really clear and precise with what we're communicating in order to achieve this. And because it takes so much attention and effort from the audience, we also have to use all the other elements that are going on, such as visuals or the space we're in, really effectively in order to ensure that attention is on us, the speaker. So if a speech isn't so much about the information we're presenting and more about the connection with the audience, what are we trying to do with the audience? The answer is we're trying to transform how the audience feels. So you want to make the audience feel confident in us as the speaker and therefore confident in the idea that we're presenting. And in order to make our audience feel this transformation towards confidence, we've got 3 steps that we can take. We've got the writing of the speech, we've got the creation of your PowerPoint, and then we've got the delivery or the presentation in person. There's 5 steps to writing a good speech, and we're going to break them down. The 5 steps are audience, personalization, structure, clarity, and tone. Knowing who your audience is really key for giving a good presentation, and this is because we're trying to build that connection between speaker and audience. So we want to make our audience care about us and care about the information so that they're engaged with what we're saying. And how we do that is we present as confident and trustworthy in order to be able to mimic that response in our audience. We also try and deliver something that's memorable and that takes into consideration the context of the people we're talking to. So in order to figure out who we're talking to and why they might care, we can use the 5 W's, the who, what, when, where, why. And if we can answer all those questions, we might better understand why this group of people might care about what we're saying or about who we are. So in building this connection, we have 2 parts. We have the audience and we have the speaker. And the speaker is really important because through bringing yourself to the PowerPoint, as in your experiences, your personality, your life story, you make a speech that's really specific to you and therefore is unique. When something's unique, it becomes memorable for the listener. And that's what we're trying to build. We're trying to build an experience that they're going to remember and feel. So how can we do this? How can we personalize it? We can bring anecdotes and stories. We can use wording that's our own, and we can demonstrate this transition. For example, we could say, when I first heard about this idea, I was skeptical, but after hearing all these facts, I felt really confident in the idea, and I hope by showing you these facts, you'll feel the same. So that's demonstrating the transition that we want the audience to feel. I would say the most important part of giving a speech is the structure. And that's because, just like we talked about before, when we're listening to something, we can't see the structure in the same way we can when it's written down. We can't see the paragraph breaks, we can't reread it, we can't see the breakdown of the idea as clearly. So I want you to imagine that you're holding the hand of your listener and that you're guiding them through this idea and pointing out where you're up to. So there's 2 main ways we can achieve this. The first is to signpost. So we do this throughout the speech, but especially at the beginning and the end. And signposting is about giving an overview of where you're going. So you can imagine that you're driving and you see a road sign that says Bondi City, Redfern. This shows you the possibilities of where you can go, and if you know that if you follow these directions, you're going to arrive at these places. Same idea for when you're giving a speech. You want to start by saying, in this speech, I will make 3 points. The main idea of each point will be this, and the conclusion that I want to reach will be this. So that's signposting. At the beginning of each of your points, or what would it be, your paragraphs when you're writing, you can say, my first point is this. For example, blah, 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 blah. The second thing you can do is to label. So this is with your connecting words, and there's already a list in your emails. Connecting words are things such as, for example, for instance, as a result, in conclusion, as shown by. So what they do is they point to the sentence ahead and they say, this sentence is going to give evidence. This sentence is a conclusion. This sentence follows on. It shows the links between ideas. They're really important when you're giving a speech. So clear, obvious structure is unbeatable. The next part of writing a speech is the clarity. So once again, your listeners only get one opportunity to understand what you're saying. So you need to make it really clear the first time. And when you're giving a speech, this isn't the opportunity to use all the big words you know. You want to use the most direct, simple language so that when your audience hears it, they understand it the first time. You don't want them to be thinking about what you've said as you're saying something else, because then they're going to get behind and lose the momentum of your argument. So use short sentences, use short words, be really clear about what you're saying and know what you're saying and say it the first time. So the last thing we have is the word choice of our speech. Again, we're trying to build up this relationship of confidence between the speaker and the audience. And we can do that with our word choice. So we can use academic language to show that we understand the context we're talking in. We can use friendly and open language that shows that we're aware that there's somebody listening and we want to bring them in rather than exclude them from this idea. And we can use really clear, direct language that shows the structure and shows that we really understand this topic. And when we use this sort of tone, what we can do is we build confidence and authority. That's going to help with this relationship and this transformation that we're aiming for. So we've written our script. What happens next? Well, we've got to build up a PowerPoint to go behind us while we're speaking. So let's look at the 3 elements of a good PowerPoint: structure, visuals, and text. So what's the purpose of a PowerPoint? Well, it's not just to have something pretty to decorate your presentation. It's to direct the audience's attention to where it matters most. So again, the audience is listening to this stream of words coming out, and sometimes that can just sound like a barrage at them. What we want to do is to be able to break it up with key words on our PowerPoint in order to direct the attention to where they need to be listening or what they need to be listening for. But I want you to remember as you're building this that at the end of the day, you as the speaker are the most important part, because it's the relationship between speaker and audience that you're trying to build. So you want a PowerPoint that helps you communicate this message rather than distracts from it. So the first element to a good PowerPoint is its structure. There's a few tips here that we can just use as guidelines as you're building it up. So the first one is that there should only be one idea per slide. Again, you're trying to point the audience's attention to where it's most important. And if there's more than one idea per slide, your audience is going to get lost as to what they should pay attention to. This is going to mean that you're going to end up with more slides than you would otherwise, and that's absolutely fine. It's great to have lots of slides. Other things you can do is to only have 6 items per slide. So this includes text and images. The reason for this is after 6 items, our attention and our ability to take in information decreases significantly. So it sort of plateaus from 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then after 6, it drops really suddenly. So if you have more than 6 things on a slide, your audience is not going to take in not even the first 6. They're just going to say, oh, too much information, not engaged. We can use dot points. Again, this is about being concise and having it really clear what the audience should pay attention to. And then each of these dot points should have under 10 words. Again, the most important thing is us, and if we have more than 10 words per dot point, that's going to take attention away from us as the speaker. When we imagine making a PowerPoint, we often think about visuals first, and we often think about having something pretty behind us as we're speaking. But if this is what you're adding visuals for, avoid it completely. It's better to have nothing than something that distracts or is confusing for the listener. So the purpose of visuals should be to direct attention where we need it to go. Scientifically, our attention is drawn to things that are big, things that are moving, things that are in leading colours, so that's warm colours like red, yellow, and orange, and things that are high contrast. So when we see things like this, we're going to pay attention to that especially, and so we need to use that selectively and to our advantage. In practice, using these tips can look like having a dark background with text that's light. It can look like having a body that with the text smaller than the heading, and it can look like using animations in order to direct attention where we want it to go, such as arrows or lines. Have a look at this slide here. See if you can read the information and see if you take it in. What do you think about this slide? Now have a look at this slide. It's got exactly the same information, but the background is dark with some light text. It doesn't have any moving images that are irrelevant, and the heading font is smaller than the body font. This one is way more easy and accessible for an audience member to take in the relevant information. The final part to making a good PowerPoint is the text. So when you're putting text onto a PowerPoint, you need to be really careful not to fall into the trap of just putting your whole speech on the PowerPoint. And the reason for this, once again, is we're trying to direct the audience's attention to where it needs to go. So when you put a keyword on the PowerPoint, what it does is it primes the audience to listen out for the keyword and also to listen to what you're saying in relation to the keyword. So it really helps to guide the reader along as they're listening to get to the main point. So you need to be careful that you put the right keywords on there and also be really specific with what you choose. You need to use dot points, once again, as simple and short as possible. And you need to remember that audiences, when they're listening to you, can't read at the same time. We only have enough processing power to take in one channel of information. So if you're going to be speaking, you need to have keywords that are really short. And if you want your readers to be listening and to be reading something such as a quote or a key piece of information that you really want written out in the full, you need to pause and give them space to be able to read that. So be really specific with your text. Delivery is the part of a speech that makes most of us scared. And I think it's important to remember that it is scary for everyone. We all get those jitters before we stand up, and we all feel a bit nervous about being in front of our classmates or our peers or our colleagues and delivering information. But there's some really simple ways that we can sort of get around this. And the first is to remember that we all go through this, and the rest we'll cover in the 3 elements of delivery, which are pace, tone, and body language. So the first part of delivering your speech is the pace. So pace is about the speed at which you say the words. And the ways that we can use pace are to communicate emotion, such as confidence, and to emphasize key points. So when we use pace effectively, it gives the audience time to read information that we have on the screen, gives the audience time to absorb what we're saying and then reflect on it. It shows the audience what parts are important to listen to. Often when we say something important naturally, we'll just leave a little gap afterwards, like that. Also, when people are confident, they don't feel the need to rush what they're saying, and so they speak slowly. That's an important thing that we can replicate when we're giving a speech, to give the impression that we're confident, even if we're super duper nervous. The second element of delivery of your speech that we can think about is tone. So tone is about how high or low the sound coming out is, and about the quality of that sound. So naturally, when we're listening to people talk, we hear cues that we associate with different traits. And here we're trying to emulate confidence. And there are some ways that we can do this. If someone is confident, they generally talk loud because they're not afraid of being unheard. They talk really clearly because they want what they're saying to be heard, and they sound really practiced because they are aware of what they're saying and how it's going to come out. So with our tone, we want to speak low, we want to speak slow, and we want to convey confidence. The next element is body language. So that's what we do with the rest of our body, our face, our hands, and our stance as we're delivering this speech. So there's a few key parts of body language that we naturally pick up on when we are watching someone give a speech. So the first is eye contact. We can use eye contact to create a relationship with specific people in the audience. And it's really useful to rove around. So look at each person one by one until you've looked at everybody in the room as you're giving your speech. What this does is it brings them into your speech. It makes them engage because you've personally looked at them. And it makes that relationship between you and that specific audience member really strong. The next thing is to use hand gestures. Now, hand gestures can really be whatever you want. The purpose of a hand gesture is to show that you're engaged and actively presenting this and excited by what you're saying. So often we like to have our hands above our waist. We like to sort of have our palms facing upwards, and then we can do whatever we want. Lots of people just move them up and down. It doesn't really matter so long as they're moving. This sort of gesticulation keeps you as the most important thing in your speech. Now, you can do whatever you want with your face, but when people are confident, they tend to smile. So that's a good place to start. And finally, confident people don't need to move around. They want to be seen. They're sure in what they're saying. So if you stand really still, so plant your feet quite wide, don't cross your legs, don't sway side to side, stay still, feel confident, take a few deep breaths. You're trying to pretend that you're the most confident person in the room, and if you feel it, your audience probably will too. So here are some tips in order to achieve this body language and delivery that we've been talking about. So palm cards are these little pieces of cardboard that can fit in one hand, and on a palm card you can either have cues if you've memorized your speech and can recite it from the cues, or you can print out your whole speech. The idea of having a palm card is twofold. First, it means that you can still gesticulate because it's in one hand. You don't hold it like this. So that means that you can still stay engaging as a speaker. And the second is if you print out a large sheet of paper, it acts as a sort of barrier between you and the audience. It means that the audience probably can't see your face. You're probably not moving very much. You're probably holding it up in front of your face so you can't make eye contact. And when the purpose of a speech is to build this relationship between speaker and audience, having a piece of paper there is really unhelpful. So palm cards are super useful. You can buy them at Officeworks, or you can just cut up a piece of paper. Rhetorical questions are something we can use in our writing. So what it is a question that we don't want an answer for. And the purpose of having a rhetorical question is to engage the audience in what you're saying. So you pose a question that makes them think. So for example, I could say, do you find giving presentations really scary? Well, I've got some tips for you, blah, 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 blah. So in that example, I've given you a question, you've had to think and put yourself into the scenario. And so we're building up this rapport between you and I, and this relationship that centers on the information I'm trying to convey to you. The next one is really important. So it's something that actors do a lot. It's that if you want to perform in a certain way, you've got to practice that way. So if you want to perform confident, you have to practice confident. You can't practice just reading it in your head and sitting on your bed. You got to stand up. Often in front of a mirror is really good, or you can video yourself so then you can watch yourself back and get some feedback. You got to speak the way that you're going to speak in front of the class. So loud, slow, clear, low voice. You got to stand confidently. You've got to have your palm cards and practice moving your hands, because this sort of memory, this embodied memory, is really deep. And when we get scared, this is the sort of stuff that's going to come out. So it's really important to practice your speech the way you want to perform it. And also just practice it full stop. The more times you read the speech, the more familiar you're going to get with the words you're going to be saying. And when you get nervous, that's what's going to come out. So make sure you practice. And last, before you get started, stand there, take a few slow, calm breaths, and then let your body calm you down so that you can feel confident delivering your speech. So a lot of our assessment is now on Zoom, and that means that some of these tips are a bit hard to apply. So there's some Zoom specific tips that we can put into practice here. First, have a light background. Remember, the speaker is the most important part of a presentation. So you want to bring attention to yourself. Have a stable camera. So that means don't use your phone or your iPad where it's going to be moving around. Use a computer where this camera stays really still. Have limited design details. This is because when we're doing a presentation over Zoom, you're relying on broadband and internet speeds to be able to get the information across. And if you have animations, it's probably going to lag and then be distracting. So try and keep it as simple as possible. And use headphones. So audio quality is really important. If they can't hear you, they're not going to get any information that you convey. So make sure that you practice all this beforehand and give it a test. When we ran this event in person in May in Sydney, we asked registrations if they wanted to have any questions answered, and these are two of the ones that came up. So first, someone asked if it's appropriate to have videos in a presentation. This is a big if, so it depends on a lot of things. Videos are really engaging, but obviously you can't have a video as you're speaking because videos will be where the attention of the audience is attracted. But they can be a really good little thing to have quotes in a video or to start off your presentation with something that brings the listener in and gets them really engaged. I think the best policy here is to check with your lecturer because this is up to their preference. The next question was whether to include quotes in a PowerPoint, and the answer is definitely. Quotes are the sort of thing that you want your audience to really pay attention to because they're your evidence. So you can definitely put a quote in your PowerPoint, but you just got to remember, as with any text on a PowerPoint, you need to give your audience time to be able to read this. So you can be really clear about this. You can say, here is a quote from X source who supports this idea I've been making. Please read it. And then pause for them to read it. And after you've read it in your head, continue your speech. But if you don't give them that time, or if you just read it out yourself, then the audience is going to be reading it while you're talking and they're going to take in neither source of information. When we ran this event in person, we did a Kahoot, and that was really fun and a really good way to test how much of this information students had retained and a really good way to reinforce that learning. I am not sure, obviously it's not as fun to do it alone, but the learning's still there. So I recommend that you take out your phone and scan this and pause the video while you're at it. In the in-person workshop, it was a skill building session, so it was practical, and by the end of the session, the students had built a presentation following these guidelines and then given it to the group, and we gave them feedback. Obviously, that's not possible in a video, but I still really recommend that you give it a practice. So choose a really simple topic such as pineapple belongs on pizza and just make a practice presentation about that. I recommend using Canva, so just Google Canva and you can get a free account, and that's a really good platform to make your PowerPoints on. It's super easy. This is made on Canva. They look good and professional, and you can follow these tips really easily with templates and stuff. In lieu of you not being able to get feedback in that sort of group session, I'm really happy to have a look over any presentations you make, any scripts you have for presentations that are coming up for your assessment. If you want to do a run through of your assessment script, like practice presenting it, I'm happy to do that over Zoom with you and give you some feedback. This is all the sort of learning environment that we're trying to build up at IMC. So I am really available if you want to book in a consult to practice any of these skills. You can also book in a consult for any other question you might have, and the QR code will take you to the booking link. As we wrap up, I just want to emphasize the 3 most important things that I hope you've taken away from this presentation. So the first is that your audience has one chance to take in the information you're giving them. So make it count. Be really clear, be really obvious, use a structure, use all the tools at your disposal to help them understand the first time. The second, I want to emphasize is that we can only take in one channel of information at a time. And so that means you need to use it really selectively. If you're talking, don't encourage your audience to be reading or watching a video or looking at a visual. You need the attention on you as much as possible. And last, you're the most important element of your presentation. It's about this relationship you build with the audience and about the confidence that you exude that then you hope that they feel at the end. So you want them to feel confident in you and therefore confident in what you're saying. And the way we do this, the way we build this connection of confidence is through clarity. So go back through the tips and make sure that you're using every tool at your disposal to be clear in what you're presenting. Always happy to answer any questions, and I hope this was a useful session for you. Bye-bye.